Hey guys, going to be doing an emerald recut from Zambia. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It is a little over 4 carats oval cut. It's got pretty nice jardin, which is French for garden, and it basically looks like vines and moss inside of the stone. So we're going to get right into this here, and I'm going to start by cutting the girdle. Now the girdle is actually the perimeter of the stone. And basically, the first thing you do is you cut the girdle. Now, what I'm actually going to do to make this a little easier, these sintered discs, I believe, are 6 millimeters or 5 millimeters thick. So this is a complete slab of nickel embedded with diamond. Now, I'm just going to put this little 6-inch master lap on. And the whole idea of this is just going to raise this lap up just a little bit. Makes my life a little bit easier when I'm shaping the girdle. Otherwise, when I bring this masthead down, the quill hits against the splash pan here, and I'm trying to hold it down out of the way. It just makes things a little nicer for ease of cutting.
So one thing I always check for is I want to see if I think that the dop is going to get cut. Doesn't look like it is. Depends how deep we end up going, so I'll move that there.
And I also like to cover the surface with a shop towel. I believe they're called shop towels. It's basically like a piece of paper towel, but it's blue. It's a little more heavy duty. And I just set that underneath here, and that's just to help keep water off the machine and inside. So we're going to start on index 2, and I'm going to show you guys in real time how this goes. So when you're shaping an oval, it's actually one of the more complicated cuts, and the reason that is when you're doing a circle or a square, for example, everything's going to be even on the girdle, which is the width of the stone. Now with an oval, to actually get it to make the oval shape, you're going to constantly, on each different cut, be altering and changing the height of the mast. So it does make things a little more challenging, and that's okay because I prefer a challenge. Now circles are fun because they're quick, but when it comes down to it, cutting shield shaped gemstones and also cutting ovals are my favorite. Now I have designed a few as well, and I was inspired to do my Starship series jewelry line, so it kind of looks like a little spaceship, and a lot of those cuts are I guess you'd call it a shield shape. They almost look like little rockets. I have some that are coffin. And I just kind of like the obscure shape stones, things that you're not going to find traditionally in a jeweler shop. And I've always liked things that kind of stand out and are unique, so that's what inspired me to create the Starship series, was to create one-of-a-kind, unique jewelry. And hopefully other people will share a common interest in that, but maybe you won't, and that's okay too. I just do whatever I feel like doing, and I was inspired to do the Starship series, so that's what I did. Now, whenever I get a custom order, I usually persuade people to go with the more complicated, unique cuts, and sometimes people just want to go with the traditional, and that's fine too, because there is no right answer. Everyone's got their own preference. And I respect everyone's decision, and I think that traditional jewelry is really nice as well. Now, when you get traditional jewelry and you put a little twist on it and it's custom, what I typically do is I will take something like a round or a circular cut, and I'll add on a ton more facets, so it's more complicated, has a higher brightness, and it's going to have more sparkle and shine in the end due to that. Now I have some gem cutting software that allows me to design gemstones and see what type of light return they're going to have. And I think that it's pretty revolutionary and amazing to have access to. And I think that if you're going to get something done, you might as well try and maximize the brightness. That's kind of the point of jewelry. So it's interesting to me when I get these recut stones to do. They kind of hack these up in third world countries, and they don't really take any of those things into consideration. It's more about just having a finished product. And a lot of the times I'm dealing with windowing, which is where, like, you're looking out your bedroom window, you see straight through it. And when the gemstone has windowing, it's not very ideal. It defeats the whole point of the gemstone, which is to send the light back to the person viewing the stone from the external light source that's entering the gemstone. Now, when it comes to emerald, actually, the light return isn't so important, as the gem doesn't really have proper light return because it's so close to opaque, meaning that you can't see fully through it. And when it comes to emerald, it's all about the yield, which is the weight of the stone, the precision of the cut, which is the symmetry, and just quality of basically craftsmanship that goes into it with the polishing. And then you have the color. And this one has an exceptional color to it, so definitely worth getting recut. It just had a really poor symmetry. Now, I decided to make this video a little different. I'm just going to kind of talk through it. It's a little bit like gemstone cutting. I was going to say ASMR, I believe it's called, but I guess it wouldn't be because I'm rambling. It's more of a podcast style, I guess. But just as time progresses, I want to have different bits of content and change up the way I'm doing things, and I thought maybe this would be a unique style to try. I'm going to take my look at the girdle, kind of see how things are cutting. It's going really well. I'm going to index to 6. Now, not that you're ever going to wing it, but if there's a gemstone you're ever going to wing it on and just kind of figure it out as you go, it's going to be an emerald. Now, basically what happens is when I'm going to cut the stone and I feel like if I were to change certain angles on the pavilion or the crown, if it's going to help with the yield, you can feel free to do that. And again, the reason is it's not really about the math and geometry on the emerald. It's about the weight, it's about the color, and it's about the cut. So, and by the cut, I don't mean the math on this particular one, I mean the symmetry. So I am going to change the angles on this design to best fit the previous pavilion. And let's just make up some numbers for a hypothetical situation. If the previous angles on this are 70, 65, and 60, but my diagram says to cut them at 39, 40, and 47, I'm going to change the angles to best match the original angles, and that's going to help with our yield, which is going to be really important on this one. Now, basically every carat you're cutting away, depending on the value of the gemstone, it's obviously going to be very significant. So hypothetically, again, this isn't the case with this one, but let's say this emerald was worth $5,000 a carat. If I'm going to shave off 2 carats of the gemstone to follow the gem diagram, that's potentially $10,000. So it doesn't really make much sense to do so. Now, with a different gem, let's just say an alexandrite, you're not going to change the angles to fit the size of the stone, because what's going to happen is then you're going to have windowing. So even though the gem is worth a lot of money per carat, if you end up having a windowed alexandrite, it kind of defeats the point of the gemstone because it's not really going to have any sparkle and shine. So that's why emerald is kind of a fun one, where you can wing it, so to speak, and it's not really wing it, it's actually a very calculated decision, but I just mean you're working on the fly and you're altering the original design kind of as you go to best fit the specific piece that you have. So on the girdle, I'm going to follow the diagram because I've already picked one that's going to fit this shape really well. But when it comes to the angles on the crown and the pavilion, that's when we're going to start to kind of change things up a bit. So I'm slowly working my way around. Now there is 16 different cuts around the girdle, which is the perimeter. And basically I am on the 11th cut. Now what I'm focusing on right now is symmetry. And if everything goes properly by me adjusting the height as I need, it's going to create an oval. And now that is kind of where it doesn't matter how awesome your machine is or how well you're going to follow your gem diagram. The actual height adjustment, a lot of that has to do with the skill of the cutter, because you have to know how much to shave for each row of facets to actually get this to cut into the proper shape that you're going for. And I would say that all, just like everything in life, comes with time. Another thing is I'm listening for the sound. So I'm hearing that it's making a significant cut. And then what I'm going to do is watch my countdown basically on my digital dial here. As the angle drops down to 90 degrees, like my hand, it's saying 91, 90.5, 90. It starts to do a skip. I see that it makes 90. And whenever I feel the same pull, there's a little bit of resistance. When it seems like it's a similar pull, I know it's time to move on. Now, that's just to get the main shape in. I'm actually going to go back around and visibly check every facet, make sure things are aligned. I just found that when I checked each facet right after they were cut, it was a little more time consuming, where if I'm making sure that each row is going as planned, so I'm feeling right now that seems pretty similar. Now I know I'm ready to move on. When I feel like I'm just checking each facet, I notice that the time it takes to cut the stone is significantly more. So this is just something I've learned watching other cutters. I cut the row of facets in, make them all symmetrical, see how that looks, and if I need to make an adjustment, I make an adjustment to all of them. So I'm already starting to look now to see what facets I think need to be cut further. And so far, things are actually looking pretty good. So I recently got this sintered diamond lap, and this thing is pretty incredible. It's going to last a lifetime. Now, eventually little bits of this nickel will wear away, and as that happens, it just exposes more crystal or more diamond embedded within. Now, the other laps I have are electroplated, so it's about let's say 12 millimeters of steel and about a millimeter on top of diamond. Now the price significance in this is, or the price difference is significantly more with the sintered diamond laps, but they also last forever, so you got to keep that in mind. I was burning through those electroplated ones pretty quickly, maybe 6 months to 10 months, just depending on the amount of use. Some people say you can get years out of them. It just depends how much cutting you're doing. And for me, it was time to just make the buy and go for the sintered. And it's one of the best decisions. Okay, so I'm going to move the camera right now and show you guys what the new shape of this looks like. And then I'm going to carry on with the dialogue, and we're going to move on to the crown. Now, when I'm actually doing When I'm actually doing a recut, basically I start with the crown. And the reason that is, I like to dop the pavilion first. It's easier to dop the pavilion than the crown. I make sure everything's properly centered, and then I start with my crown. Alright, so when I'm done the girdle, I just move my sponge and my cloth to the side. We don't need that for right now. Lift this up, index at 96, and change the angle to 32.09. So if you guys are watching, leave a comment underneath. Let me know what country you're from. I can actually check the YouTube analytics, and it shows me all the different countries, and it's pretty interesting. So just let me know. I'm also curious to know if you like this style of cutting video. It's definitely unique. I haven't done this before, where I just kind of talk to the camera and I show you guys a real-time video of what it's like to cut a stone. Okay. So it's going to be cut a little bit, look a lot. That's pretty important, no matter what you're cutting. Alright, that looks like pretty good depth. We're going to swap to the next facet. Move this a hair forward. And that's just so I can sweep closer to the center of the lap and get a nice consistent cut and wear my lap in evenly. Now once I actually get the splash pan up, I can turn the speed up a little bit. I've never been a cutter that runs the speed more than, I'd say, 75% speed. Some guys do. Not really my thing. It just creates a lot of splash from the water, and the machine vibrates pretty significantly, and it just doesn't really seem necessary. So this is the way I cut. Now the color of this is pretty nice. It's I say almost like a blue. It's very unique when I get it in the light. I'm always glad when I get to recut a stone, and it's things out of the norm. It's not that emeralds are that out of the norm, but it's one of the stones that I cut less often. I've been cutting a lot more sapphires lately, and that's in the corundum family, which is the same family as ruby. So actually ruby is quite literally a sapphire, but just a red sapphire. And the sapphire family has basically a whole spectrum of color, depending on how knowledgeable you are with gems. A lot of you might have known that already, but I remember when I learned that, I was pretty amazed by that. Okay, so we've done our first two cuts on the crown, and I'm going to move to the next four. Now the next four is going to have a slight angle change at 28.48. Now that's one of the advantages of this machine with the digital dial. It gives me the ability to hone in on 1/100th of a degree. Now I've had quite a few different machines now. It's pretty amazing when I look back already in my short faceting career, in the fact that I started off on an old machine from the late 80s, I was actually doing glass blowing, and I was focusing on chandeliers, and I was wanting to cut gemstones. I was wanting to cut glass, marbles, similar to a gemstone for my chandeliers. So I got this old machine. It was an Ultratech from, I think it was 1988. Sorry. Yeah, 1988. Anyhow, it was a pretty awesome machine, and then I eventually decided, okay, you know what? I'm actually going to take straight up with the gems themselves instead of cutting marbles. And I sold that machine and bought this one here, which is the newest version of the Ultratech. Now, since then, I've started my faceting classes, and I have Facetron, I have Raytech Shaw, and I have Ultratech. So because I've purchased all these different brands, of course I've used them all, and I have my opinion on each one of them. And I feel like I got pretty lucky. Maybe it's just I'm a bit of a fanboy, but Ultratech is my favorite of all of them. It is also the most expensive, so I think there's a reason for it. And when you kind of see the difference between each machine and the way the machines are engineered, designed, and how they perform, it does come down just to personal preference. I know a lot of people that really like the Raytechs. I think they're pretty sweet. Just this machine's the best for me. And anyhow, it's got the digital dial, which is pretty awesome for more complicated designs. For the simpler designs, the other machines are pretty sweet, but I do prefer this one. The way the mast works, which is this arm here, it really is the top of the line. And I do enjoy a mast machine where there is the handpiece machines, such as the Raytech Shaw I was referring to. Now, all the machine brands that I've purchased are the American brands. I don't believe in kind of skimping out on some of these Chinese or Indian machines. And the other thing is, when it comes to replacement parts, if your motor ever wears out or you ever need to contact the company directly, it's a little more difficult with these kind of no-name machines. I've heard a lot, and I've heard people talk highly of some of the Australian machines. I don't mess with those either because Australia is across the world. I reside in Canada, and it's just not really practical. But I would suggest that if you are watching this video in Australia right now and you're considering getting into lapidary, faceting, gem cutting, whatever terminology you'd like to use, you would probably be best off buying, I think it's the Gem Master, and there's another brand, the Gem Masters for the cabochons. There's another brand for the mass machine. Anyhow, I'd recommend buying their brand just because it's domestic. Okay guys, my camera's gonna die. I'm going to charge it, and I'll talk to you guys in a few minutes here. You can just see how uneven this girdle is, or this pavilion. So you can really see how uneven this pavilion is. Now the culet, which is supposed to be the point at the very top, like the top of a mountain, it's not very uniform. Very sloppy cut here. Look at it from the side. It does not look right at all. So I'm going to fix all this right now. And I'm actually going to be changing the angles in the software. So the design that I've decided to use, it's saying to do a pavilion at 40.8 degrees. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change that to 50. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get some more carat out of this. And if 50 doesn't form a culet, which is a point, it might be like a flathead screwdriver with a gap between. We'll tilt the angle in a little bit until we form that culet. And I'm just going to do that to maximize the weight, because on the Emerald, the math is not as important. Actually, the math is actually completely irrelevant, because this gem is way too cloudy to actually have any difference on how much sparkle and shine it's going to have. It's very opaque. So we're just going to try and fix this slanting. I just can't believe how slanted that pavilion really is. One of the worst I've seen personally. So it's a good thing we're going to be fixing this one up. So I'm going to index this at 2, dial in 50.8 I'm going to start with, and we're going to see what happens.